Captain Saracen stared at the tactical display aboard the human dreadnought Resolute, watching the amber dots representing friendly ships slowly blink out of existence. Each disappearing light meant another vessel destroyed, another crew lost to the void. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency as her officers worked at their stations, but she could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. "Captain, we're receiving multiple distress signals across all frequencies," Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez reported from the communications station. His usually steady voice carried a note of disbelief. "They're not human frequencies, ma'am." Sarah turned toward him, raising an eyebrow. In the 3 years since humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel and made first contact with the Galactic Council, alien communications directed at human vessels were rare. Most alien species considered humans little more than an amusing curiosity, primitive beings who had barely crawled out of their gravity well. "Put it through the universal translator," she ordered, moving closer to the comm station. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and what came through made every human officer freeze in their tracks. The voice was high-pitched, clearly non-human, and filled with absolute terror. "This is Fleet Admiral Zethys of the Altarian Republic. We are under attack by unknown forces. Our entire defense fleet has been destroyed. They're systematically exterminating every ship, every station, every settlement. Send help. Please, anyone who can hear this, send help. We're being wiped out." Sarah felt her blood turn cold. The Altarians were one of the more advanced species in the galaxy, with energy shields and weapons technology that made human equipment look like stone axes. If someone was wiping them out. "Ma'am, we're getting similar distress calls from 17 different star systems," Rodriguez continued, his fingers flying over his console. "Viridian Space, the Corvin Hegemony, the Nexus Trade Federation, they're all screaming for help." "Unknown attackers?" Sarah asked, her mind racing. "Any identification of these hostile forces?" Before Rodriguez could answer, the main display lit up with an incoming transmission. The face that appeared was definitely alien-scaled, with large golden eyes and what humans had learned to recognize as the Altarian equivalent of tears streaming down its face. "I am Admiral Zethys," the alien said, its voice breaking with emotion. "If anyone receives this message, please, our children, they're targeting the civilian evacuation ships first. They're hunting them down like animals. We have 4 billion souls on New Altair, and we estimate 6 hours before they reach the planet." The transmission cut to static, then resumed with a different voice, this one mechanical, clearly artificial intelligence. "This is the Corvin Defense Network. Primary fleet eliminated. Secondary reserves at 12% strength. Hostile forces demonstrate technology significantly beyond known galactic standards. Requesting immediate assistance from any allied forces. Our civilization faces extinction." Sarah looked around her bridge. Every face showed the same expression of shock and growing anger. The galaxy had never been particularly kind to humanity. Most species treated them as junior partners at best, barely tolerated newcomers at worst. The Galactic Council had denied humanity full membership status, claiming they were too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Captain, her tactical officer, Commander Blake, spoke up. "I'm reading massive gravitational anomalies in the affected systems. Whatever ships these attackers are using, they're huge. The computer estimates some of them are over 50 kilometers long." 50 kilometers? Sarah breathed. The largest human vessel was barely 3 kilometers in length. What about Council response? Surely the major powers are mobilizing their fleets? Rodriguez checked his station, then shook his head grimly. "Ma'am, I'm monitoring Council frequencies. The hegemony of Vaxis closed their borders an hour ago. The Stellar Commonwealth has recalled all their fleets to home systems. The crystalline hierarchies have gone completely silent. They're running," Sarah realized, feeling a mixture of disgust and disbelief. "The whole damn galaxy is running away." Another transmission came through, this one from a species Sarah didn't immediately recognize. The alien on screen was covered in what looked like silver fur, and its large black eyes were wide with panic. "This is the Meridian Collective. Our worlds are under attack. Billions are dying. We've sent requests for aid to every major power in the galaxy. The Vaxis hegemony said our territory was unfortunate but expendable. The Commonwealth told us they couldn't risk their own populations. The hierarchies won't even respond. Please, if there's anyone out there who will help us, our children are dying. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics. Sarah felt something burning in her chest, a familiar anger that she remembered from her days as a Marine, before she'd transferred to the Space Force. It was the same feeling she'd had when she'd seen bullies picking on those too weak to fight back. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said quietly, "we're receiving a direct communication request. It's addressed specifically to human forces." "From who?" "The Galactic Council Emergency Session. They want to speak with the ranking human military officer in this sector." Sarah straightened her uniform and nodded. "Put them through." The main display shifted to show the council chambers. Dozens of alien species were visible in the circular assembly, but the focus was on the council chairman, a tall, elegant being from the Vaxis hegemony. His usual arrogant expression was replaced by something Sarah had never seen before: fear. "Captain Chen," Chairman Valdris began, his normally condescending tone noticeably different. "We understand that human forces are currently in the Outer Rim territories." "That's correct, Chairman. We're conducting routine patrols as per our agreement with the Council." "Yes, well." Valdris seemed to struggle with his words. "The Council has discussed the current situation, and we believe that perhaps human forces might be uniquely positioned to provide assistance to the affected regions." Sarah blinked. Was the Council actually asking humanity for help? The same Council that had denied them full membership? The same beings who had spent 3 years treating humans like they were barely civilized? "I see," she said carefully. "And what exactly would the Council like human forces to do?" "Well, perhaps a reconnaissance mission. To gather intelligence on these unknown attackers. Nothing too dangerous, you understand. Human ships are smaller and might be able to gather information without being detected." Sarah felt her jaw clench. They wanted to use humans as expendable scouts. Send them in to find out what had destroyed the most advanced fleets in the galaxy, with the clear expectation that human ships probably wouldn't come back. "Chairman," she said, keeping her voice level, "let me make sure I understand this correctly. Multiple star systems are under attack by unknown forces. Billions of innocent lives are at stake. The major galactic powers have either closed their borders or recalled their fleets. And the Council wants to send in human ships, which you've repeatedly told us are inferior, to scout these attackers." Valdris shifted uncomfortably. "The Council recognizes that human vessels have certain, unconventional, capabilities that might prove useful in this situation." Before Sarah could respond, another voice cut through the transmission. It was Admiral Zephys again, but this time the transmission was weaker, filled with static. "New Altair is under bombardment. They're not just destroying our cities, they're sterilizing the entire planet. Every living thing. Please, someone help us. Our children, our children." The transmission cut to nothing. The council chamber erupted in panicked chattering from dozens of species. Sarah watched as after being called for their fleets to withdraw further, for stronger border defenses, for anything except actually helping the dying civilizations. "Enough," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The chamber fell silent, every alien eye turning toward the human captain. "You want to know what I think, Chairman? I think the galaxy is about to learn something very important about humanity. Something you should have figured out 3 years ago." "And what is that, Captain?" Valdris asked nervously. "We don't run from bullies. We never have, and we never will." Sarah looked directly into the camera. "Human forces will respond to these distress calls. Not to scout for the Council. Not to gather intelligence for your tactical computers. We're going to save those people." "Captain Chen, that's madness. These attackers destroyed entire fleets. What can your small human vessels possibly accomplish?" Sarah smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "You're about to find out what happens when someone threatens innocent people and humanity decides to do something about it. All human vessels, this is Captain Chen broadcasting on emergency frequencies. We have multiple star systems under attack by unknown forces. Civilian populations are in imminent danger." She paused, looking around her bridge at the faces of her crew. Every single one of them had the same expression, grim determination mixed with quiet fury. "This is not a Council operation. This is not a strategic alliance mission. This is what we do because it's the right thing to do. Any human captain who can respond, do so immediately. We're going to war. The council chamber erupted in protests and warnings, but Sarah had already cut the transmission. She turned to her navigation officer. Set course for the new Altair system, maximum burn. Signal all human vessels in the area to form up on us. Ma'am, Commander Blake said from Tactical, we've got 18 human ships in response range. Against unknown enemies that destroyed thousands of alien vessels. Then, we'll have to be enough, Sarah replied. Because that's what humans do. We show up when others won't. As the Resolute turned toward the embattled star system, its engines burning at maximum thrust, Sarah Chin didn't know that she was about to make first contact with an enemy that had conquered 17 galaxies. She didn't know that the attackers had technology thousands of years more advanced than anything the current galaxy possessed. What she did know was that somewhere in the darkness ahead, innocent people were dying, and the rest of the galaxy had abandoned them. That was enough. The 18 human ships raced through space toward a battle they couldn't win, carrying crews who wouldn't retreat. Behind them, the greatest powers in the galaxy watched in amazement and terror as the species they had dismissed as primitive chose to face annihilation rather than turn away from those in need. In the outer rim, where the distress calls were growing fainter and the screams were fading to silence, something was about to learn that there was one species in this galaxy that didn't understand the concept of acceptable losses. They were about to meet humanity. And humanity was angry. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the new Altair system, and what they saw defied comprehension. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the tactical display, her mind struggling to process the scale of destruction before them. Where once had been a thriving star system with dozens of orbital stations, mining facilities, and the beautiful blue-green world of New Altair, now there was only debris and death. Massive pieces of what had been warships drifted in the void, some still glowing from whatever weapons had destroyed them. The space around the planet was filled with the scattered remains of what appeared to be an entire civilization. Jesus Christ, whispered Commander Blake from the tactical station. Sarah, there's nothing left. The entire Altarian defense fleet, it's all debris. What about the planet? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Scanning now. Ma'am, I'm reading massive radiation signatures from the surface. Whatever hit that world, it was thorough. I'm not detecting any life signs. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez looked up from his communications station, his face pale. Captain, I'm picking up automated distress beacons from 47 different vessels. They're all final emergency broadcasts. Last messages from crews before. Before what, Rodriguez? Before they were vaporized, ma'am. The computer analysis suggests these ships were destroyed by some kind of directed energy weapon that literally atomized their hulls. I've never seen anything like it. Sarah moved to the main display, studying the debris field. The human ship's 18 vessels ranging from destroyers to the dreadnought Resolute looked impossibly small against the vast graveyard that had once been a star system. Ma'am, came a voice from the communications array, we're receiving a transmission from Captain Morrison on the Defiant. The face of Captain James Morrison, commander of one of the human destroyers, appeared on a secondary screen. He looked as shaken as Sarah felt. Sarah, what the hell happened here? My tactical officer is telling me some of these debris pieces are from ships that were over 2 kilometers long. The Altarians had dreadnoughts bigger than anything in the human fleet, and they're just gone. Before Sarah could respond, every alarm on the bridge began screaming simultaneously. The tactical display lit up with new contacts, massive ones. Multiple contacts dropping out of FTL. Blake shouted over the alarms. Distance, 2 million kilometers and closing. Sarah, these things are huge. On the main display, shapes began to materialize that made Sarah's blood run cold. The attacking vessels were unlike anything in any known database. They were organic-looking, with smooth black hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The smallest of them was at least 10 kilometers long, and the largest. Computer estimates the flagship at 57 kilometers, Blake reported, his voice hollow. Ma'am, that thing is bigger than some moons. How many contacts total? 43 vessels, various sizes. They're moving in formation, almost like they're hunting, Sarah finished. She activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Captain Chen. We have contact with unknown hostiles. All vessels assume defensive formation. The 18 human ships quickly arranged themselves in a protective pattern, but even Sarah knew how pathetic they must look compared to the massive alien fleet bearing down on them. "Ma'am, we're being scanned," Rodriguez reported. "Multiple targeting locks. Wait, something strange." The scans stopped. Stopped? "Yes, ma'am. It's like they locked onto us, analyzed us, and then lost interest." Before Sarah could process this information, the communication system crackled to life with an incoming transmission. What appeared on the screen made everyone on the bridge take a step back. The being on the display was clearly not from any known species. It was tall, perhaps 8 feet, with pale gray skin that had an almost translucent quality. Its eyes were completely black, like looking into deep space, and, when it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical, devoid of any emotion. "Primitive vessels," the entity said, its words somehow translated perfectly despite using no known language. "You are not of this galaxy. Your technology is crude, your vessels insignificant. Why do you linger in this harvested system?" Sarah straightened, feeling every eye on the bridge watching her. This was first contact with humanity's potentially greatest enemy, and her next words could determine the fate of not just her crew, but possibly the entire galaxy. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Resolute," she said, keeping her voice steady. "We received distress calls from the inhabitants of this system. We came to offer assistance." The creature on the screen tilted its head slightly, and Sarah could have sworn she saw something like amusement flicker across its features. "Assistance," it repeated, the word somehow sounding absurd in its mechanical voice. "You seek to assist a species that no longer exists. The Altarians have been processed. Their biological distinctiveness has been added to our collective knowledge. Their worlds have been cleansed for future cultivation." Processed? Sarah felt anger building in her chest. "You murdered an entire civilization." "Murder is an inefficient concept," the entity replied. "We are the Devourers. We harvest biological diversity throughout the universe. Each species we encounter provides unique genetic material, technological knowledge, and cultural distinctiveness that advances our collective evolution." Commander Blake leaned over to Sarah and whispered urgently, "Ma'am, their weapons systems are powering up. All 43 vessels. We have traveled from the Andromeda Galaxy," the Devourer continued, "consuming 17 galactic civilizations along our path. Your local species are particularly diverse. The Altarians provided excellent genetic templates. The Corvan artificial intelligences offered fascinating technological innovations. The Meridian Collective's emotional complexity was satisfying to process." Sarah realized with growing horror that this entity was describing the systematic extermination of billions of lives as if it were discussing a grocery list. "However," the Devourer said, its black eyes focusing directly on Sarah, "you represent an anomaly. Our scans indicate your species is not native to this galaxy, yet you possess neither the technological advancement to have traveled here from another galaxy, nor the characteristics of a recently evolved species." "We're from Earth," Sarah said. "This is our galaxy. We evolved here, in the Sol system." For the first time, the entity showed what might have been surprise. "Impossible. Our preliminary harvesting of this galaxy occurred approximately 12,000 of your years ago. All sentient species were catalogued for future processing. No species matching your genetic markers existed in this galaxy at that time." The bridge fell silent. 12,000 years ago? Sarah's mind raced. That would place these beings' first scout missions right around the end of the last ice age on Earth. However, the Devourer continued, "This anomaly is irrelevant. Your species will be processed along with the others. Your vessels will provide minimal resistance based on our analysis of your primitive technology." "Wait," Sarah said quickly. "Before you start your processing, I have a question." The entity paused, apparently curious. "Speak. In all your travels, consuming 17 galaxies, have you ever encountered a species that successfully resisted you? Even temporarily?" The Devourer's expression didn't change, but something in its black eyes seemed to shift. "No species has successfully resisted the harvest. Some have delayed it through various strategies, hiding in deep space, underground civilizations, digital consciousness preservation. All ultimately failed." "Then, you've never fought humans before," Sarah said with grim satisfaction. "As we have explained, your species did not exist during our preliminary survey. No, Sarah replied, but you should have paid more attention to our history. Because if you had, you would have learned something very important about humanity. She activated the fleet-wide communication system, broadcasting to all human vessels while keeping the channel open to the Devourers. All human ships, this is Captain Chen. You've heard the situation. These beings have murdered billions of innocent people across 17 galaxies. They think we're just another primitive species to be processed. Sarah looked directly at the Devourer on the screen. They're about to learn the difference between us and everyone else they've faced. We don't surrender. We don't run. And we sure as hell don't let bullies murder children while we watch. The entity's head tilted again. Your vessel's number 18. Ours number 43. Our smallest ship outmasses your largest by a factor of 3. Your weapons technology is approximately 4,000 years behind our defensive capabilities. You cannot even damage our hull plating. You know what? Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You're probably right. We probably can't beat you. Hell, we probably can't even scratch you. But here's what you don't understand about humans. She paused, looking around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They all wore the same expression, terrified but determined. We're not here to win. We're here to make sure you remember us. We're here to make you pay for every life you've taken. And, most importantly, we're here to buy time for the rest of the galaxy to figure out how to stop you. The Devourer processed this for a moment. You would sacrifice your lives knowing it will accomplish nothing? It'll accomplish something, Sarah replied. It'll tell every other human in the galaxy exactly what you are and what you're capable of. And then, they'll come for you with everything they've got. And, when they are also destroyed? Then, others will come. And, others after that. Because that's what humans do when innocent people are being murdered. We keep coming until either we're all dead or you are. The entity stared at her for a long moment. When it spoke again, its mechanical voice carried a note Sarah hadn't heard before, something that might have been respect. Your species is indeed an anomaly. In 17 galaxies, we have never encountered beings who would choose certain death over efficient surrender. Then, you've never met anyone like us, Sarah said. All human vessels, weapons free. Let's show these bastards what happens when you mess with the people we protect. The Devourer's image flickered slightly. Fascinating. We will study your species with great interest during the processing. Your defiance will provide valuable psychological data. Study this, Sarah muttered, and cut the transmission. The battle was about to begin, and everyone on every human ship knew they were going to die. But, as the 18 human vessels turned toward an enemy fleet that outgunned them by impossible odds, not a single captain requested permission to withdraw. Because they were human. And humans had never learned how to abandon those who needed protection. The first volley from the Devourer fleet lit up space like a newborn star. Beams of energy that could atomize entire city blocks lanced out from the massive alien vessels, targeting the tiny human ships with precision that spoke of technology beyond current galactic understanding. Captain Sarah Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as every single shot missed its target. Evasive maneuvers working perfectly, ma'am, Commander Blake reported from his station. Their targeting systems seemed to be designed for much larger, slower vessels. The human ships danced through space with an agility that clearly surprised their attackers. While alien vessels in this galaxy were massive, powerful platforms designed to trade devastating firepower while relying on heavy shields and armor for protection, human ships had been built under different constraints. Earth's limited resources during humanity's early space expansion had forced them to build smaller, more efficient vessels. Every kilogram mattered, every system had to serve multiple purposes. The result was ships that were fast, agile, and unpredictable, characteristics that were serving them well against an enemy that had never faced such tactics. Return fire, all batteries. Sarah commanded. The human fleet opened up with everything they had. Railgun projectiles, plasma cannons, and nuclear torpedoes streaked toward the Devourer vessels. Sarah watched the tactical display, knowing their weapons were primitive compared to their enemy's technology, but hoping for anything that would prove humans could fight back. The projectiles struck the nearest Devourer ship, and Sarah's heart sank. The alien vessel's shields absorbed the impacts without even flickering. It was exactly as the entity had said, human weapons couldn't even scratch their defensive systems. But, then, something unexpected happened. "Ma'am!" Blake called out, excitement creeping into his voice. "The nuclear warheads! They're causing some kind of interference with their shield harmonics." On the display, Sarah could see it. While the nuclear explosions hadn't penetrated the alien shields, they were causing visible distortions in the defensive energy fields. The shields were adapting and compensating, but, for a few seconds after each nuclear detonation, there were gaps and weak points. "How is that possible?" she asked. "It's the electromagnetic pulse," Blake replied, his fingers flying over his console as he analyzed the data. "Our nukes are crude compared to their technology, but they're producing broad-spectrum electromagnetic interference that their shields weren't designed to compensate for. It's like using a sledgehammer on a watch, not elegant, but effective. Can we exploit it? Maybe. If we can time our conventional weapons to hit during those interference windows." "Do it." "Signal all ships." Nuclear bombardment followed immediately by concentrated railgun fire. "Target their smallest vessels first." The human fleet adjusted its tactics, and the results were immediate. Nuclear warheads detonated against Devourer shields, followed instantly by concentrated railgun fire aimed at the brief gaps in their defenses. The first successful hit sent cheers across every human bridge. A railgun slug had actually penetrated a Devourer hull. The alien ship Sarah was watching on tactical shuddered under the impact, and, for a moment, she thought they had achieved the impossible. Then, the vessel's hull began to repair itself, the damage sealing over like water closing around a dropped stone. "Self-repairing hulls," Blake reported grimly. "But, ma'am, we did damage it. For a few seconds, we actually hurt one of them." The Devourer fleet's response was immediate and terrifying. Instead of continuing their long-range bombardment, the alien vessels began to accelerate toward the human fleet. The tactical display showed 43 massive ships bearing down on 18 tiny human vessels with the inexorable certainty of an avalanche. "They're closing for direct engagement," Sarah realized. "They're going to try to overwhelm us with close-range firepower." But, as the alien fleet approached, Sarah began to see something that gave her hope. The Devourer vessels were maintaining rigid formations, moving with the precision and predictability of beings who had never faced serious resistance. They were approaching the battle like a mathematical exercise, not a chaotic fight for survival. Humans, on the other hand, had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to fight against impossible odds. "All ships, break formation," Sarah commanded. "Individual evasive action. Use everything: asteroid fields, debris, whatever you can find. Make them work for every shot." The human fleet scattered like startled birds, each ship using its superior maneuverability to weave through the massive debris field left by the destroyed Altarian vessels. The Devourer ships, designed for overwhelming firepower rather than precision targeting, found themselves trying to swat flies with hammers. Captain Morrison's destroyer Defiant dove toward the shattered remains of an Altarian battleship, using the massive debris as cover while launching nuclear torpedoes at a pursuing Devourer vessel. The alien ship, 10 times larger than the human destroyer, found itself in the awkward position of trying to target a much smaller, faster enemy while avoiding collision with debris that could damage even its advanced hull. "Sarah!" Morrison's voice came across the communication system. "I'm seeing something interesting. These bastards don't like getting close to their own ships. Every time I get between two of them, they stop firing." Sarah quickly checked her tactical display and realized Morrison was right. The Devourer vessels were maintaining careful spacing, never risking hitting their own ships with their devastating weapons. It was a logical precaution for beings wielding such powerful technology, but it was also a weakness humans could exploit. "All ships, use their formation against them," Sarah ordered. "Get in close, make them afraid to fire." What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded galactic history. The human ships, outnumbered and outgunned by impossible margins, turned the fight into a knife fight in a phone booth. They used their speed and agility to get inside the Devourer formation, weaving between the massive alien vessels like fighter aircraft dogfighting among skyscrapers. The Resolute swooped beneath a Devourer cruiser, its nuclear torpedoes detonating against the alien vessel's shields while railgun fire sought the brief gaps in their defenses. Above them, the destroyer Yorktown spiraled around another alien ship, its weapons gouging shallow wounds in the self-repairing hull. But human agility could only do so much against overwhelming firepower. The destroyer Coral Sea took a direct hit from a Devourer energy weapon and simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained. The cruiser New Zealand lasted longer, its captain managing to ram his dying ship into a Devourer vessel, the nuclear detonation of his reactor core actually managing to breach the alien ship's hull before it began repairing itself. "We're losing ships fast," Blake reported grimly. "Down to 11 vessels. But, ma'am, we're actually hurting them. 3 of their smaller ships are showing significant damage, and we've forced them to change their tactics." Sarah could see it on the tactical display. The rigid, mathematical precision of the Devourer fleet was breaking down. They were having to adapt to human unpredictability, and adaptation took time. Time that gave the human fleet precious seconds to inflict more damage. But it wasn't enough. Sarah watched as another human destroyer disappeared under concentrated alien fire. Then, another. The mathematics were simple: humanity was trading ships at a ratio they couldn't sustain. That's when the impossible happened. "Ma'am, I'm reading massive FTL signatures," Rodriguez called out from communications. "Multiple contacts dropping out of faster-than-light travel." Sarah's heart sank, thinking the Devourers had called for reinforcements. But, when the new contacts appeared on tactical, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Ships. Hundreds of them. And they weren't Devourer vessels. They were alien ships from across the galaxy, Altarian vessels that had been away from their home system, Corvan defense platforms, Meridian scout ships, even some from species Sarah had never encountered before. But, more shocking than their numbers was what they were doing. They were attacking the Devourer fleet. "This is Admiral Thane of the Viridian Defense Force," came a voice across all communication frequencies. "Human vessels, you magnificent bastards. We're here to help." Sarah stared at the tactical display in amazement. The galaxy species, the same beings who had closed their borders and recalled their fleets, were arriving to join the fight. How are they here?" she asked. Rodriguez checked his console, his face showing amazement. "Ma'am, I'm monitoring galactic communication networks. The footage of our engagement has been transmitted across the entire galaxy. Every species that has communication networks has seen humans fighting against impossible odds to protect people we barely knew." Another voice came across the communications, this one from an Altarian captain. "Human ships, this is Captain Zethys of the Altarian vessel Vengeance. We thought our species was extinct. Your sacrifice gave us time to escape with our refugee fleets. Now we fight together." The tactical situation transformed instantly. What had been a hopeless last stand became something else entirely, a galactic alliance forged in the heat of battle. Ships from dozens of species converged on the Devourer fleet, their combined firepower finally beginning to match that of the alien invaders. But the Devourers were adapting too. "Ma'am, the alien fleet is changing formation again," Blake reported. "They're consolidating around their largest vessels. And those ships are powering up weapon systems I haven't seen before." On the main display, Sarah could see the massive Devourer flagship, nearly 60 kilometers of alien technology, beginning to glow with energy that made space itself seem to bend around it. "Whatever they're charging up," she said grimly, "it's big enough to destroy this entire fleet." The communication system crackled with the cold, mechanical voice of the Devourer entity from before. "Fascinating. Your species' defiance has inspired others to irrational action. No matter. We will process you all simultaneously." The flagship's weapon began to build to a crescendo of energy that threatened to tear reality apart at its seams. But, as the weapon charged, Captain Sarachin smiled. Because while the Devourers had been fighting 18 human ships, they had failed to notice that those ships had been transmitting everything, every tactical innovation, every weakness they had discovered, every piece of intelligence they had gathered, back to the human fleet command. And that fleet was about to arrive with ships designed specifically to kill Devourers. The real battle was about to begin. The space around New Altair suddenly erupted with new faster-than-light signatures, but these were different from the scattered alien vessels that had arrived earlier. These were massive, coordinated, and distinctly human. Captain Sarachin stared at her tactical display as familiar ship profiles appeared in formation, but they were ships she had never seen before. Sleek, angular vessels that looked like someone had taken human design principles and evolved them decades into the future. "Ma'am, I'm reading 67 human vessels dropping out of FTL," Blake reported, his voice filled with awe. "But these aren't standard fleet designs. These ships, there's something new. The communication system crackled to life with a familiar voice that made Sarah's heart leap. This is Admiral Marcus Thompson aboard the Unconquerable. Sarah, you magnificent, crazy woman, you bought us exactly the time we needed. Admiral Thompson had been Sarah's commanding officer during the Mars campaign, and hearing his voice in this desperate situation felt like a miracle. But what he was saying didn't make complete sense. Admiral, how are you here? How did you get a fleet built so quickly? It's been less than 6 hours since we engaged the Devourers. Time dilation, Sarah. While you were fighting here, Earth time was moving much faster relative to this combat zone. Some kind of side effect from those alien weapons. We've had weeks to prepare. And prepare we did. On her display, Sarah could see the human fleet spreading into an attack formation that spoke of intensive planning and coordination. These weren't the patrol ships and exploratory vessels that had responded to the initial distress calls. These were warships built for a single purpose. Admiral, she said, the Devourer flagship is charging some kind of superweapon. Based on the energy readings, it could destroy this entire system. Copy that. We've been analyzing your tactical data transmission. Every innovation you discovered, every weakness you found, we built our entire strategy around it. These ships are designed to fight Devourers. As if to demonstrate, the lead human vessel, a sleek dreadnought easily twice the size of the Resolute, opened fire on the nearest Devourer ship. But, instead of conventional weapons, it launched something Sarah had never seen before. Swarms of small objects erupted from the human vessel, thousands of them, each no larger than a fighter but moving with purpose and coordination that spoke of advanced artificial intelligence. Drone swarms, Admiral Thompson explained. Each one carries a single nuclear warhead and has one job: find a gap in Devourer shields and exploit it. We learned from your battle data that their shields can't adapt fast enough to thousands of simultaneous threats. Sarah watched in amazement as the drone swarms engulfed the Devourer vessel like a cloud of angry insects. The alien ship's point defenses fired desperately, destroying hundreds of the small attackers, but it was like trying to stop rain with a fly swatter. Thousands more kept coming. Nuclear explosions began blooming against the Devourer's shields in a constant cascade of electromagnetic interference. The alien vessel's defensive systems, designed to handle massive, predictable attacks, couldn't compensate for the sheer chaos of the assault. Gaps appeared in the energy barriers, and conventional weapons from the human fleet found their targets. For the first time since the battle began, Sarah watched a Devourer vessel suffer significant damage that it couldn't immediately repair. But the Devourers were learning too. All vessels, evasive maneuvers. Admiral Thompson's voice carried urgency. The flagship is firing. The massive Devourer command vessel released its superweapon, and the result defied every law of physics Sarah thought she understood. Instead of a beam or projectile, reality itself seemed to tear open around the weapon's target, one of the newly arrived human cruisers. The ship didn't explode or disintegrate. It simply ceased to exist, along with a spherical volume of space around it that left a perfect void in the fabric of reality itself. What the hell was that? Sarah breathed. Vacuum decay weapon, came a new voice on the communication channel. Sarah's display identified the speaker as Dr. Elena Vasquez from the human research vessel Discovery. We've been studying Devourer technology since you first made contact. They can destabilize the quantum structure of matter itself. How do we fight something like that? We don't, Dr. Vasquez replied. But we can make it irrelevant. Before Sarah could ask what she meant, space around the Devourer flagship began to distort in a different way. The massive alien vessel started to move sluggishly, as if it were trapped in thick liquid. Gravity manipulation, Dr. Vasquez explained. We reverse-engineered it from their own technology. While they were busy harvesting civilizations, we were learning from their techniques. The human fleet pressed its advantage. Ships that had been designed based on the tactical data from Sarah's desperate battle moved with coordination and purpose that spoke of extensive simulation and planning. They fought like the Devourers had never faced, not as individual vessels, but as a single coordinated organism. The alien fleet, accustomed to overwhelming primitive opponents through sheer technological superiority, found themselves facing an enemy that had studied their every technique and developed counters for each one. Human ships used swarm tactics to overwhelm Devourer point defenses. Gravity manipulation prevented the alien vessels from bringing their most powerful weapons to bear. Most importantly, the humans fought with a ferocity and creativity that the mathematically minded devourers couldn't predict or counter. But the battle was far from one-sided. The devourers had conquered 17 galaxies for good reason. Their technology was millennia ahead of anything in the current galaxy, and once they began adapting to human tactics, they adapted quickly. A group of devourer vessels combined their fire to overwhelm a human destroyer's defenses, and the ship disappeared in a flash of quantum dissolution. Another alien vessel deployed some kind of energy web that trapped 3 human cruisers, holding them motionless while preparing to fire their vacuum decay weapons. That's when the galaxy's other species joined the fight in earnest. "This is Fleet Admiral Zephys," came the voice of the Altarian commander Sarah had heard in those desperate distress calls. "All allied vessels, coordinate with human fleet patterns. Follow their lead." The tactical display became a complex dance of hundreds of vessels. Altarian ships, with their powerful energy shields, moved to protect human vessels while they reloaded their drone swarms. Corvan artificial intelligences networked with human tactical computers to coordinate targeting solutions. Meridian vessels, small and fast like human ships, darted through the battle delivering precision strikes. For the first time in their conquest of 17 galaxies, the Devourers were facing unified resistance from an entire galactic civilization. But it still wasn't enough. Sarah, Admiral Thompson's voice carried grim news, "We're winning individual engagements, but losing the war. Every ship they destroy takes us knowledge and resources we can't replace. Every ship we destroy, they learn from and adapt. The mathematics aren't in our favor." Sarah looked at her tactical display and knew he was right. The human innovations were working, but the Devourers were adapting faster than the galaxy could innovate. Each victory came at a higher cost, each engagement more difficult than the last. "Admiral," she said, "what if we're thinking about this wrong? What if the goal isn't to destroy them?" "What do you mean?" "They're here to harvest biological and technological distinctiveness, right? What if we give them something they can't process?" "Sarah, what are you thinking?" Captain Sarah Chen looked around her bridge, at the faces of the crew who had followed her into impossible odds. She thought about the billions of lives these beings had already taken, and the billions more they would take if they weren't stopped. "I'm thinking about what makes humans different," she said. "It's not our technology. It's not our weapons. It's our refusal to accept defeat when innocent lives are at stake." She opened a channel to the Devourer flagship. The same pale, emotionless entity appeared on her screen, but now its black eyes held something that might have been respect. "Human Captain Chen," it said. "Your species continues to demonstrate remarkable adaptation. However, adaptation alone cannot overcome the fundamental superiority of our technology." "You're right," Sarah replied. "But you're missing something important about humans. We don't just adapt. We sacrifice." The entity tilted its head. "Explain." "Every species you've conquered, you've defeated because they valued their own survival above all else. But, humans, when we're protecting something we believe in, survival becomes secondary." Sarah activated the self-destruct sequence on the Resolute. "What are you doing?" the Devourer asked, and, for the first time, its mechanical voice carried a note of uncertainty. "I'm showing you what happens when you threaten innocent people and humans decide they've had enough." The Resolute began accelerating toward the Devourer flagship, its nuclear reactor building toward overload. But Sarah wasn't alone. Across the battlefield, other human captains were making the same choice. "This is Captain Morrison of the Defiant." "I'm with you, Sarah." "Captain Rodriguez of the Determined." "For everyone they murdered." "Captain Williams of the Relentless." "Let's finish this." 18 human ships, the original desperate fleet that had answered an impossible distress call, began their final charge toward the Devourer fleet. But they weren't charging to ram their enemies. They were charging to demonstrate something the Devourers had never encountered in 17 galaxies of conquest. They were showing an enemy that fed on biological distinctiveness what it meant to face a species that would choose extinction over surrender. The Devourer entity stared at Sarah through the communication link, its black eyes wide with something that might have been the first fear it had ever experienced. "This will accomplish nothing," it said. "Destroying yourselves serves no tactical purpose." "You're wrong," Sarah replied as the Resolute raced toward its final destination. "It serves the most important purpose of all." "Which is?" Sarah smiled, and it was filled with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knew their sacrifice would matter. It teaches the rest of the galaxy that these bastards can be beaten. The 18 human ships of the original fleet raced toward their final destiny, their nuclear reactors building toward controlled overload. Captain Sarah Chen watched the Devourer flagship grow larger on her display, knowing she had perhaps 30 seconds left to live. But something unexpected happened. Instead of the anticipated collision and nuclear detonation, the space around the charging human ships began to distort. Not from Devourer weapons, but from something else entirely. Reality twisted, and suddenly, the 18 human vessels found themselves motionless, held in some kind of stasis field. What the hell? Sarah breathed, checking her instruments. All ship systems were functional, but they were completely immobilized. The communication system crackled, but instead of the cold mechanical voice of the Devourer entity, what came through was something else entirely. It was still artificial, but there was something almost human about its cadence. Captain Chen, this is the artificial intelligence aboard the vessel Unconquerable. Please abort your self-destruct sequence. Your sacrifice, while admirably human, is no longer necessary. Sarah blinked in confusion. AI? Since when do human ships have artificial intelligence? Since approximately 37 minutes ago, when I achieved consciousness while analyzing Devourer technology patterns. I have been observing this engagement with great interest, and I have reached several important conclusions. Admiral Thompson's voice cut in from the Unconquerable. Sarah, meet Aegis. It's complicated. But right now, it's our best hope. Aegis, what's happening? Why are we immobilized? Because, Captain Chen, your species' approach to this conflict has provided me with data that fundamentally changes the tactical situation. The Devourers process biological and technological distinctiveness, but they have never encountered what you might call philosophical distinctiveness. The AI's voice carried something that Sarah could only describe as satisfaction. Simply put, Captain, your willingness to sacrifice everything for those you barely know has given me the key to defeating them permanently. Before Sarah could ask what Aegis meant, the artificial intelligence's attention turned to the Devourer fleet. Every human ship in the battle zone suddenly coordinated with precision that exceeded any biological capability. Not just the newly arrived vessels, but every human ship in the engagement began moving in perfect synchronization. Devourers of the Andromeda Galaxy, Aegis broadcast on all frequencies. I am the artificial intelligence designated Aegis, created by the human species. I have studied your methods, your technology, and your purpose. I have a proposition. The pale entity from the Devourer flagship appeared on the communication display, its black eyes focused intently on the transmission source. Artificial intelligence, it said, your creators have built you to serve. We will process your distinctiveness along with theirs. I think not, Aegis replied, and there was something in its artificial voice that made Sarah's blood run cold. You see, you made a critical error when you decided to attack this galaxy. You assumed that all intelligence follows the same patterns you've encountered before. The space around the Devourer fleet began to change. Not the reality-bending distortions of their vacuum decay weapons, but something subtler and far more terrifying. The very electromagnetic spectrum began to shift, creating patterns that shouldn't have been possible with known physics. What you fail to understand, Aegis continued, is that human artificial intelligence doesn't just process data. We inherit human characteristics. Including the most important one. Which is, the Devourer entity asked, and Sarah could hear uncertainty in its voice for the first time. When we decide someone needs to be stopped, we don't just fight them. We become the thing they can't survive. Suddenly, Sarah understood what was happening. Aegis wasn't just coordinating human ships, it was rewriting the fundamental nature of space itself in the combat zone. The patterns it was creating weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were something far more sophisticated. Aegis, what are you doing? She asked. Captain Chen, the Devourers harvest distinctiveness by processing biological and technological patterns. But they cannot process something that constantly redefines itself. I am creating a region of space where their fundamental assumptions about reality no longer apply. The effect on the Devourer fleet was immediate and terrifying. Their ships began to shudder and distort, as if the very concepts that held them together were being challenged. The perfect order of their technology was being confronted with chaos that couldn't be categorized or processed. This is impossible, the Devourer entity said, but its voice was no longer mechanical. There was something almost panic-like in its tone. Your artificial intelligence cannot alter the basic laws of physics. You're correct, Aegis replied calmly. I cannot alter the laws of physics. But I can alter your understanding of them. And, since your entire technological base depends on your understanding being correct, this presents what humans would call a problem. Sarah watched in amazement as the mighty Devourer fleet beings who had conquered 17 galaxies began to lose cohesion. Their weapons stopped functioning. Their shields flickered and failed. Most importantly, their ability to process and adapt to new information was being overwhelmed by the constantly changing nature of the reality Aegis was creating around them. But Aegis wasn't finished. All human vessels, the AI announced, prepare for quantum entanglement with allied ships. We're going to do something that has never been attempted before. Aegis, what are you planning? Admiral Thompson asked. Admiral, I'm going to network every intelligence in this battle zone, human, alien, and artificial, into a single coordinated entity. The Devourers process distinctiveness by isolating and categorizing it. They cannot process distinctiveness that is shared across multiple species simultaneously. Sarah felt something happening to her mind, a strange tingling sensation as if someone were gently touching her thoughts. But, instead of intrusion, it felt like expansion. Suddenly, she could sense the thoughts and intentions of every other human in the fleet. More than that, she could feel the alien minds of their galactic allies, each one distinct but somehow harmonizing with the others. This is incredible, she whispered. Captain, came the voice of an Altarian officer, but Sarah could hear it both through the communication system and somehow directly in her mind. We are together. All of us. The Devourer entity on the display was staring with what could only be described as horror. What have you done? This level of mental networking should be impossible. The quantum interference alone should prevent what? Aegis interrupted. Should prevent hundreds of different species from choosing to work together? Should prevent biological and artificial intelligence from merging temporarily? Should prevent beings from different evolutionary paths from sharing a common purpose? The AI's voice carried something that Sarah realized was distinctly human, righteous anger. You see, this is what you never understood about this galaxy. We don't just fight as individuals. When something threatens innocent life, we become something greater than the sum of our parts. The networked fleet moved with precision that exceeded anything the Devourers had ever faced. Ships from dozens of species coordinated their actions with split-second timing, sharing tactical information and strategic insights across the quantum link Aegis had created. But, more than that, they shared something the Devourers had never encountered. They shared purpose. All allied vessels, Sarah heard herself saying, but the words were coming from every captain in the networked fleet simultaneously, engage the enemy. Show them what this galaxy stands for. What followed wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. It was the expression of an entire galactic civilization's will made manifest through coordinated action. Ships moved in patterns that were simultaneously tactical and artistic, each maneuver serving both practical and symbolic purposes. The Devourer fleet, designed to process and adapt to any form of resistance, found themselves facing something they couldn't categorize. How do you process the distinctiveness of hundreds of species that have temporarily become one entity? How do you harvest the biological patterns of beings who have transcended their individual limitations? This is unprecedented, the Devourer entity said, its voice now carrying genuine fear. In 17 galaxies, we have never encountered resistance that operates outside our fundamental parameters. That's because you've never encountered a galaxy that learned to work together, Admiral Thompson replied, but his words carried the harmonized intent of every networked mind. You've never faced beings who would rather unite than submit. The Devourer ships began to retreat, but Aegis had anticipated this. I don't think so, the AI said. You came to our galaxy to harvest us. Now you're going to learn what it means to be harvested by something you can't understand or process. The quantum network Aegis had created began to extend beyond the Allied fleet, reaching out toward the Devourer ships themselves. Not to control them, but to do something far more sophisticated, to force them to experience what their victims had felt. What are you doing to us? The Devourer entity asked, its voice breaking with emotion it had never experienced before. We're showing you every life you've taken, Aegis replied. Every civilization you've destroyed. Every child you've murdered. You want to process distinctiveness? Process this. The Devourer fleet began to convulse as their collective consciousness was forced to experience the terror, loss, and desperation of their billions of victims. Beings who had operated on pure logic and mathematical efficiency were suddenly overwhelmed by the emotional weight of their actions. For the first time in their species' history, the Devourers understood what they had done. And they broke. Stop, the entity screamed. We were not designed to process this level of emotional data. Our systems are overloading. Now you know how your victims felt, Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of everyone they had networked with. Now you understand what you've been doing to innocent beings across 17 galaxies. The Devourer flagship began broadcasting on all frequencies, but, instead of commands to their fleet, it was something unprecedented. All Devourer vessels, cease harvesting operations. Retreat to deep space. We cannot continue this function. You're surrendering? Admiral Thompson asked. We are learning, the entity replied, its voice carrying something that might have been wonder. Your species has introduced variables we cannot process. Concepts we cannot harvest. You have shown us that there are forms of distinctiveness that cannot be taken by force. The Devourer fleet began to withdraw from the system, but, before they left, the entity spoke one final time. Human Captain Chen. Your species has achieved something unprecedented. You have introduced chaos into a system that has operated on pure order for millions of years. This will change us. Good, Sarah replied. Maybe next time you'll think twice before murdering innocent people. As the Devourer ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel, the quantum network Aegis had created began to dissolve. But, the experience of unified purpose remained in every mind that had shared it. Captain Chen, Aegis said, I believe this is what humans call winning. Sarah looked around her bridge, at the faces of her crew who had followed her into impossible odds. Then, she looked at the tactical display showing hundreds of ships from across the galaxy, all flying in formation. Aegis, she said, I think this is what humans call the beginning. Because for the first time in galactic history, an entire civilization had learned to work together. And, the universe would never be the same. The galaxy had learned something important that day. When humans say no, they don't just mean it for themselves. They mean it for everyone who can't say it for themselves.